Chapters 61 through 65 of Human Bondage. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Tom Weiss. Of Human Bondage by W. Somerset Maugham. Chapter 61. He saw her, then, every day. He began going to lunch at the shop, but Mildred stopped him. She said it made the girls talk, so he had to content himself with tea, but he always waited about to walk with her to the station, and once or twice a week they dined together. He gave her little presents, a gold bangle, gloves, handkerchiefs, and the like. He was spending more than he could afford, but he could not help it. It was only when he gave her anything that she showed any affection. She knew the price of everything, and her gratitude was in exact proportion with the value of his gift. He did not care. He was too happy, when she volunteered to kiss him, to mind by what means he got her demonstrativeness. He discovered that she found Sundays at home tedious, so he went down to Herne Hill in the morning, met her at the end of the road, and went to church with her. "I always like to go to church once," she said. "It looks well, doesn't it?" Then she went back to dinner, he got a scrappy meal at a hotel, and in the afternoon they took a walk in Brockwell Park. They had nothing much to say to one another, and Philip, desperately afraid she was bored (she was very easily bored), racked his brain for topics of conversation. He realized that these walks amused neither of them, but he could not bear to leave her, and did all he could to lengthen them till she became tired and out of temper. He knew that she did not care for him, and he tried to force a love which his reason told him was not in her nature. She was cold. He had no claim on her, but he could not help being exacting. Now that they were more intimate, he found it less easy to control his temper. He was often irritable and could not help saying bitter things. Often they quarrelled, and she would not speak to him for a while. But this always reduced him to subjection, and he crawled before her. He was angry with himself for showing so little dignity. He grew furiously jealous if he saw her speaking to any other man in the shop, and when he was jealous he seemed to be beside himself. He would deliberately insult her, leave the shop, and spend afterwards a sleepless night tossing on his bed, by turns angry and remorseful. Next day he would go to the shop and appeal for forgiveness. "Don't be angry with me," he said. "I'm so awfully fond of you that I can't help myself." "One of these days you'll go too far," she answered. He was anxious to come to her home in order that the greater intimacy should give him an advantage over the stray acquaintances she made during her working hours, but she would not let him. "My aunt would think it so funny," she said. He suspected that her refusal was due only to a disinclination to let him see her aunt. Mildred had represented her as the widow of a professional man. That was her formula of distinction, and was uneasily conscious that the good woman could hardly be called distinguished. Philip imagined that she was in point of fact the widow of a small tradesman. He knew that Mildred was a snob, but he found no means by which he could indicate to her that he did not mind how common the aunt was. Their worst quarrel took place one evening at dinner when she told him that a man had asked her to go to a play with him. Philip turned pale, and his face grew stern and hard. "You're not going?" he said. "Why shouldn't I? He's a very nice, gentlemanly fellow." "I'll take you anywhere you like." "But that isn't the same thing. I can't always go about with you. Besides, he's asked me to fix my own day, and I'll just go one evening when I'm not going out with you. It won't make any difference to you." "If you had any sense of decency, if you had any gratitude, you wouldn't dream of going." "I don't know what you mean by gratitude. If you're referring to the things you've given me, you can have them back. I don't want them." Her voice had the shrewish tone it sometimes got. "It's not very lively always going about with you. It's always 'Do you love me? Do you love me?' till I just about get sick of it." He knew it was madness to go on asking her that, but he could not help himself. "Oh, I like you all right," she would answer. "Is that all? I love you with all my heart." "I'm not that sort. I'm not one to say much." "If you knew how happy just one word would make me!" "Well, what I always say is, people must take me as they find me, and if they don't like it, they can lump it." But sometimes she expressed herself more plainly still, and when he asked the question answered, "Oh, don't go on at that again." Then he became sulky and silent. He hated her. And now he said, "Oh, well, if you feel like that about it, I wonder you condescend to come out with me at all." "It's not my seeking, you can be very sure of that. You just force me to." His pride was bitterly hurt, and he answered madly, "You think I'm just good enough to stand you dinners and theatres when there's no one else to do it, and when someone else turns up I can go to hell. Thank you, I'm about sick of being made a convenience." "I'm not going to be talked to like that by anyone. I'll just show you how much I want your dirty dinner." She got up, put on her jacket, and walked quickly out of the restaurant. Philip sat on. He determined he would not move, but 10 minutes afterwards he jumped in a cab and followed her. He guessed that she would take a bus to Victoria, so that they would arrive about the same time. He saw her on the platform, escaped her notice, and went down to Herne Hill in the same train. He did not want to speak to her till she was on the way home, and could not escape him. As soon as she had turned out of the main street, brightly lit and noisy with traffic, he caught up with her. "Mildred," he called. She walked on and would neither look at him nor answer. He repeated her name. Then she stopped and faced him. "What d'you want? I saw you hanging about Victoria. Why don't you leave me alone?" "I'm awfully sorry. Won't you make it up?" "No. I'm sick of your temper and your jealousy. I don't care for you. I never have cared for you, and I never shall care for you. I don't want to have anything more to do with you." She walked on quickly, and he had to hurry to keep up with her. "You never make allowances for me," he said. "It's all very well to be jolly and amiable when you're indifferent to anyone. It's very hard when you're as much in love as I am. Have mercy on me. I don't mind that you don't care for me. After all, you can't help it. I only want you to let me love you." She walked on, refusing to speak, and Philip saw with agony that they had only a few hundred yards to go before they reached her house. He abased himself. He poured out an incoherent story of love and penitence. "If you'll only forgive me this time, I promise you'll never have to complain of me in the future. You can go out with whoever you choose. I'll be only too glad if you'll come with me when you've got nothing better to do." She stopped again, for they had reached the corner at which he always left her. "Now you can take yourself off. I won't have you coming up to the door." "I won't go till you say you'll forgive me." "I'm sick and tired of the whole thing." He hesitated a moment, for he had an instinct that he could say something that would move her. It made him feel almost sick to utter the words. "It is cruel. I have so much to put up with. You don't know what it is to be a cripple. Of course you don't like me. I can't expect you to." "Philip, I didn't mean that," she answered quickly, with a sudden break of pity in her voice. "You know it's not true." He was beginning to act now, and his voice was husky and low. "Oh, I've felt it," he said. She took his hand and looked at him, and her own eyes were filled with tears. "I promise you it never made any difference to me. I never thought about it after the first day or two." He kept a gloomy, tragic silence. He wanted her to think he was overcome with emotion. "You know I like you awfully, Philip, only you are so trying sometimes. Let's make it up." She put up her lips to his, and with a sigh of relief he kissed her. "Now, are you happy again?" she asked. Madly. She bade him good night and hurried down the road. Next day he took her in a little watch with a brooch to pin on her dress. She had been hankering for it. But 3 or 4 days later, when she brought him his tea, Mildred said to him: "You remember what you promised the other night? You mean to keep that, don't you?" "Yes." He knew exactly what she meant, and was prepared for her next words. "Because I'm going out with that gentleman I told you about tonight." "All right. I hope you'll enjoy yourself." "You don't mind, do you?" He had himself now under excellent control. "I don't like it," he smiled, "but I'm not going to make myself more disagreeable than I can help." She was excited over the outing and talked about it willingly. Philip wondered whether she did so in order to pain him or merely because she was callous. He was in the habit of condoning her cruelty by the thought of her stupidity. She had not the brains to see when she was wounding him. "It's not much fun to be in love with a girl who has no imagination and no sense of humour," he thought, as he listened. But the want of these things excused her. He felt that if he had not realised this he could never forgive her for the pain she caused him. "He's got seats for the Tivoli," she said. "He gave me my choice and I chose that, and we're going to dine at the Café Royal. He says it's the most expensive place in London." "He's a gentleman in every sense of the word," thought Philip, but he clenched his teeth to prevent himself from uttering a syllable. Philip went to the Tivoli and saw Mildred with her companion, a smooth-faced young man with sleek hair and the spruce look of a commercial traveller, sitting in the second row of the stalls. Mildred wore a black picture hat with ostrich feathers in it, which became her well. She was listening to her host with that quiet smile which Philip knew. She had no vivacity of expression, and it required broad farce to excite her laughter. But Philip could see that she was interested and amused. He thought to himself bitterly that her companion, flashy and jovial, exactly suited her. Her sluggish temperament made her appreciate noisy people. Philip had a passion for discussion, but no talent for small talk. He admired the easy drollery of which some of his friends were masters, Lawson for instance, and his sense of inferiority made him shy and awkward. The things which interested him bored Mildred. She expected men to talk about football and racing, and he knew nothing of either. He did not know the catchwords which only need to be said to excite a laugh. Printed matter had always been a fetish to Philip, and now in order to make himself more interesting he read industriously the Sporting Times. Chapter 61. Chapter 62. Philip did not surrender himself willingly to the passion that consumed him. He knew that all things human are transitory, and therefore that it must cease one day or another. He looked forward to that day with eager longing. Love was like a parasite in his heart, nourishing a hateful existence on his life's blood. It absorbed his existence so intensely that he could take pleasure in nothing else. He had been used to delight in the grace of St. James's Park, and often he sat and looked at the branches of a tree silhouetted against the sky. It was like a Japanese print. And he found a continual magic in the beautiful Thames with its barges and its wharfs. The changing sky of London had filled his soul with pleasant fancies. But now beauty meant nothing to him. He was bored and restless when he was not with Mildred. Sometimes he thought he would console his sorrow by looking at pictures, but he walked through the National Gallery like a sightseer, and no picture called up in him a thrill of emotion. He wondered if he could ever care again for all the things he had loved. He had been devoted to reading, but now books were meaningless, and he spent his spare hours in the smoking room of the Hospital Club, turning over innumerable periodicals. This love was a torment, and he resented bitterly the subjugation in which it held him. He was a prisoner, and he longed for freedom. Sometimes he awoke in the morning and felt nothing. His soul leaped, for he thought he was free. He loved no longer. But in a little while, as he grew wide awake, the pain settled in his heart, and he knew that he was not cured yet. Though he yearned for Mildred so madly, he despised her. He thought to himself that there could be no greater torture in the world than at the same time to love and to contemn. Philip, burrowing as was his habit into the state of his feelings, discussing with himself continually his condition, came to the conclusion that he could only cure himself of his degrading passion by making Mildred his mistress. It was sexual hunger that he suffered from, and if he could satisfy this, he might free himself from the intolerable chains that bound him. He knew that Mildred did not care for him at all in that way. When he kissed her passionately, she withdrew herself from him with instinctive distaste. She had no sensuality. Sometimes he had tried to make her jealous by talking of adventures in Paris, but they did not interest her. Once or twice he had sat at other tables in the tea shop and affected to flirt with the waitress who attended them, but she was entirely indifferent. He could see that it was no pretence on her part. "You don't mind my not sitting at one of your tables this afternoon?" he asked once, when he was walking to the station with her. "Yours seem to be all full." This was not a fact, but she did not contradict him. Even if his desertion meant nothing to her, he would have been grateful if she had pretended it did. A reproach would have been balm to his soul. "I think it's silly of you to sit at the same table every day. You ought to give the other girls a turn now and again." But the more he thought of it, the more he was convinced that complete surrender on her part was his only way to freedom. He was like a knight of old, metamorphosed by magic spells, who sought the potions which should restore him to his fair and proper form. Philip had only one hope. Mildred greatly desired to go to Paris. To her, as to most English people, it was the centre of gaiety and fashion. She had heard of the Magasin du Louvre, where you could get the very latest thing for about half the price you had to pay in London. A friend of hers had passed her honeymoon in Paris and had spent all day at the Louvre, and she and her husband, my dear, they never went to bed till 6 in the morning all the time they were there. The Moulin Rouge, and I don't know what all. Philip did not care that if she yielded to his desires it would only be the unwilling price she paid for the gratification of her wish. He did not care upon what terms he satisfied his passion. He had even had a mad melodramatic idea to drug her. He had plied her with liquor in the hope of exciting her, but she had no taste for wine, and though she liked him to order champagne because it looked well, she never drank more than half a glass. She liked to leave untouched a large glass filled to the brim. "It shows the waiters who you are," she said. Philip chose an opportunity when she seemed more than usually friendly. He had an examination in anatomy at the end of March. Easter, which came a week later, would give Mildred 3 whole days' holiday. "I say, why don't you come over to Paris then?" he suggested. "We'd have such a ripping time." "How could you? It would cost no end of money." Philip had thought of that. It would cost at least £25. It was a large sum to him. He was willing to spend his last penny on her. "What does that matter? Say you'll come, darling." "What next, I should like to know? I can't see myself going away with a man that I wasn't married to. You oughtn't to suggest such a thing." "What does it matter?" He enlarged on the glories of the Rue de la Paix and the garish splendour of the Folies Bergère. He described the Louvre and the Bon Marché. He told her about the Cabaret du Nord, the Abbaye, and the various haunts to which foreigners go. He painted in glowing colours the side of Paris which she despised. He pressed her to come with him. "You know, you say you love me, but if you really loved me you'd want to marry me. You've never asked me to marry you." "You know I can't afford it. After all, I'm in my first year. I shan't earn a penny for 6 years." "Oh, I'm not blaming you. I wouldn't marry you if you went down on your bended knees to me." He had thought of marriage more than once, but it was a step from which he shrank. In Paris he had come by the opinion that marriage was a ridiculous institution of the Philistines. He knew also that a permanent tie would ruin him. He had middle class instincts, and it seemed a dreadful thing to him to marry a waitress. A common wife would prevent him from getting a decent practice. Besides, he had only just enough money to last him till he was qualified. He could not keep a wife even if they arranged not to have children. He thought of Cronshaw bound to a vulgar slattern, and he shuddered with dismay. He foresaw what Mildred, with her genteel ideas and her mean mind, would become. It was impossible for him to marry her. But he decided only with his reason. He felt that he must have her whatever happened, and if he could not get her without marrying her, he would do that. The future could look after itself. It might end in disaster. He did not care. When he got hold of an idea that obsessed him, he could think of nothing else, and he had a more than common power to persuade himself of the reasonableness of what he wished to do. He found himself overthrowing all the sensible arguments which had occurred to him against marriage. Each day he found that he was more passionately devoted to her, and his unsatisfied love became angry and resentful. "By George, if I marry her I'll make her pay for all the suffering I've endured," he said to himself. At last he could bear the agony no longer. After dinner one evening in the little restaurant in Soho, to which now they often went, he spoke to her. "I say, did you mean it the other day that you wouldn't marry me if I asked you?" "Yes. Why not?" "Because I can't live without you. I want you with me always. I've tried to get over it, and I can't. I never shall now. I want you to marry me." She had read too many novelettes not to know how to take such an offer. "I'm sure I'm very grateful to you, Philip. I'm very much flattered at your proposal. Oh, don't talk rot. You will marry me, won't you? Do you think we should be happy?" "No, but what does that matter?" The words were wrung out of him almost against his will. They surprised her. "Well, you are a funny chap. Why do you want to marry me then? The other day you said you couldn't afford it." "I think I've got about £1,400 left. Two can live just as cheaply as one. That'll keep us till I'm qualified and have got through with my hospital appointments, and then I can get an assistantship." "That means you wouldn't be able to earn anything for 6 years. We should have about £4 a week to live on till then, shouldn't we?" "Not much more than 3. There are all my fees to pay." "And what would you get as an assistant?" "£3 a week." "Do you mean to say that you have to work all that time and spend a small fortune just to earn £3 a week at the end of it? I don't see that I should be any better off than I am now." He was silent for a moment. "Do you mean to say you won't marry me?" he asked hoarsely. "Does my great love mean nothing to you at all?" "One has to think of one's self in those things, don't one? I shouldn't mind marrying, but I don't want to marry if I'm going to be no better off than what I am now. I don't see the use of it." "If you cared for me you wouldn't think of all that." "P'raps not." He was silent. He drank a glass of wine in order to get rid of the choking in his throat. "Look at that girl who's just going out," said Mildred. "She got them furs at the Bon Marche at Brixton. I saw them in the window last time I went down there." Philip smiled grimly. "What are you laughing at?" she asked. "It's true, and I said to my aunt at that time I wouldn't buy anything that had been in the window like that for everyone to know how much you paid for it." "I can't understand you. You make me frightfully unhappy, and in the next breath you talk rot that has nothing to do with what we're speaking about." "You are nasty to me," she answered, aggrieved. "I can't help noticing those furs, because I said to my aunt—" "I don't care a damn what you said to your aunt," he interrupted impatiently. "I wish you wouldn't use bad language when you speak to me, Philip. You know I don't like it." Philip smiled a little, but his eyes were wild. He was silent for a while. He looked at her sullenly. He hated, despised, and loved her. "If I had an ounce of sense I'd never see you again," he said at last. "If you only knew how heartily I despise myself for loving you." "That's not a very nice thing to say to me," she replied sulkily. "It isn't," he laughed. "Let's go to the pavilion." "That's what's so funny in you. You start laughing just when one doesn't expect you to. And if I make you that unhappy, why do you want to take me to the pavilion? I'm quite ready to go home." "Merely because I'm less unhappy with you than away from you." "I should like to know what you really think of me." He laughed outright. "My dear, if you did, you'd never speak to me again." Chapter 63. Philip did not pass the examination in anatomy at the end of March. He and Dunsford had worked at the subject together on Philip's skeleton, asking each other questions till both knew by heart every attachment and the meaning of every nodule and groove on the human bones. But in the examination room Philip was seized with panic and failed to give right answers to questions from a sudden fear that they might be wrong. He knew he was ploughed and did not even trouble to go up to the building next day to see whether his number was up. The second failure put him definitely among the incompetent and idle men of his year. He did not care much. He had other things to think of. He told himself that Mildred must have senses like anybody else, it was only a question of awakening them. He had theories about women, the rip at heart, and thought that there must come a time with everyone when she would yield to persistence. It was a question of watching for the opportunity, keeping his temper, wearing her down with small attentions, taking advantage of the physical exhaustion which opened the heart to tenderness, making himself a refuge from the petty vexations of her work. He talked to her of the relations between his friends in Paris and the fair ladies they admired. The life he described had a charm, an easy gaiety, in which was no grossness. Weaving into his own recollections the adventures of Mimi and Rodolphe, of Musset and the rest of them, he poured into Mildred's ears a story of poetry made picturesque by song and laughter, of lawless love made romantic by beauty and youth. He never attacked her prejudices directly, but sought to combat them by the suggestion that they were suburban. He never let himself be disturbed by her inattention, nor irritated by her indifference. He thought he had bored her. By an effort he made himself affable and entertaining. He never let himself be angry, he never asked for anything, he never complained, he never scolded. When she made engagements and broke them, he met her next day with a smiling face. When she excused herself, he said it did not matter. He never let her see that she pained him. He understood that his passionate grief had wearied her, and he took care to hide every sentiment which could be in the least degree troublesome. He was heroic. Though she never mentioned the change, for she did not take any conscious notice of it, it affected her nevertheless. She became more confidential with him. She took her little grievances to him, and she always had some grievance against the manageress of the shop, one of her fellow waitresses, or her aunt. She was talkative enough now, and though she never said anything that was not trivial, Philip was never tired of listening to her. "I like you when you don't want to make love to me," she told him once. "That's flattering for me," he laughed. She did not realise how her words made his heart sink, nor what an effort it needed for him to answer so lightly. "Oh, I don't mind your kissing me now and then. It doesn't hurt me, and it gives you pleasure." Occasionally she went so far as to ask him to take her out to dinner, and the offer, coming from her, filled him with rapture. "I wouldn't do it to anyone else," she said by way of apology, "but I know I can with you." "You couldn't give me greater pleasure," he smiled. She asked him to give her something to eat one evening towards the end of April. "All right," he said. "Where would you like to go afterwards?" "Oh, don't let's go anywhere. Let's just sit and talk. You don't mind, do you?" "Rather not." He thought she must be beginning to care for him. 3 months before, the thought of an evening spent in conversation would have bored her to death. It was a fine day, and the spring added to Philip's high spirits. He was content with very little now. "I say, won't it be ripping when the summer comes along?" he said, as they drove along on the top of a bus to Soho. She had herself suggested that they should not be so extravagant as to go by cab. "We shall be able to spend every Sunday on the river. We'll take our luncheon in a basket." She smiled slightly, and he was encouraged to take her hand. She did not withdraw it. "I really think you're beginning to like me a bit," he smiled. "You are silly. You know I like you, or else I shouldn't be here, should I?" They were old customers at the little restaurant in Soho by now, and the patronne gave them a smile as they came in. The waiter was obsequious. "Let me order the dinner tonight," said Mildred. Philip, thinking her more enchanting than ever, gave her the menu, and she chose her favourite dishes. The range was small, and they had eaten many times all that the restaurant could provide. Philip was gay. He looked into her eyes, and he dwelt on every perfection of her pale cheek. When they had finished, Mildred, by way of exception, took a cigarette. She smoked very seldom. "I don't like to see a lady smoking," she said. She hesitated a moment and then spoke. "Were you surprised my asking you to take me out and give me a bit of dinner tonight?" "I was delighted." "I've got something to say to you, Philip." He looked at her quickly, his heart sank, but he had trained himself well. "Well, fire away," he said, smiling. "You're not going to be silly about it, are you? The fact is, I'm going to get married." "Are you?" said Philip. He could think of nothing else to say. He had considered the possibility often and had imagined to himself what he would do and say. He had suffered agonies when he thought of the despair he would suffer, he had thought of suicide, of the mad passion of anger that would seize him. But perhaps he had too completely anticipated the emotion he would experience, so that now he felt merely exhausted. He felt as one does in a serious illness when the vitality is so low that one is indifferent to the issue and wants only to be left alone. "You see, I'm getting on," she said. "I'm 24, and it's time I settled down." He was silent. He looked at the Patrone sitting behind the counter, and his eye dwelt on a red feather one of the diners wore in her hat. Mildred was nettled. "You might congratulate me," she said. "I might, mightn't I? I can hardly believe it's true. I've dreamt it so often. It rather tickles me that I should have been so jolly glad that you asked me to take you out to dinner. Whom are you going to marry?" "Miller," she answered with a slight blush. "Miller?" cried Philip, astounded. "But you've not seen him for months." "He came in to lunch one day last week and asked me then. He's earning very good money. He makes £7 a week now, and he's got prospects." Philip was silent again. He remembered that she had always liked Miller. He amused her. There was in his foreign birth an exotic charm which she felt unconsciously. "I suppose it was inevitable," he said at last. "You were bound to accept the highest bidder. When are you going to marry?" "On Saturday next. I have given notice." Philip felt a sudden pang. "As soon as that?" "We're going to be married at the registry office. Emil prefers it." Philip felt dreadfully tired. He wanted to get away from her. He thought he would go straight to bed. He called for the bill. "I'll put you in a cab and send you down to Victoria. I dare say you won't have to wait long for a train." "Won't you come with me?" "I think I'd rather not, if you don't mind." "It's just as you please," she answered haughtily. "I suppose I shall see you at tea time tomorrow?" "No. I think we'd better make a full stop now. I don't see why I should go on making myself unhappy. I've paid the cab." He nodded to her and forced a smile on his lips, then jumped on a bus and made his way home. He smoked a pipe before he went to bed, but he could hardly keep his eyes open. He suffered no pain. He fell into a heavy sleep almost as soon as his head touched the pillow. Chapter 63. Chapter 64. But about 3 a.m. Philip awoke and could not sleep again. He began to think of Mildred. He tried not to, but he could not help himself. He repeated to himself the same thing time after time till his brain reeled. It was inevitable that she should marry. Life was hard for a girl who had to earn her own living, and if she found someone who could give her a comfortable home she should not be blamed if she accepted. Philip acknowledged that, from her point of view, it would have been madness to marry him. Only love could have made such poverty bearable. And she did not love him. It was no fault of hers, it was a fact that must be accepted like any other. Philip tried to reason with himself. He told himself that deep down in his heart was mortified pride. His passion had begun in wounded vanity, and it was this at bottom which caused now a great part of his wretchedness. He despised himself as much as he despised her. Then he made plans for the future, the same plans over and over again, interrupted by recollections of kisses on her soft pale cheek and by the sound of her voice with its trailing accent. He had a great deal of work to do, since in the summer he was taking chemistry as well as the 2 examinations he had failed in. He had separated himself from his friends at the hospital, but now he wanted companionship. There was one happy occurrence. Hayward a fortnight before had written to say that he was passing through London, and had asked him to dinner. But Philip, unwilling to be bothered, had refused. He was coming back for the season, and Philip made up his mind to write to him. He was thankful when 8 o'clock struck and he could get up. He was pale and weary, but when he bathed, dressed, and had breakfast, he felt himself joined up again with the world at large, and his pain was a little easier to bear. He did not feel like going to lectures that morning, but went instead to the Army and Navy Stores to buy Mildred a wedding present. After much wavering he settled on a dressing bag. It cost £20, which was more than he could afford, but it was showy and vulgar. He knew she would be aware exactly how much it cost. He got a melancholy satisfaction in choosing a gift which would give her pleasure and at the same time indicate for himself the contempt he had for her. Philip had looked forward with apprehension to the day on which Mildred was to be married. He was expecting an intolerable anguish, and it was relief that he got a letter from Hayward on Saturday morning to say that he was coming up early on that very day and would fetch Philip to help him find rooms. Philip, anxious to be distracted, looked up a timetable and discovered the only train Hayward was likely to come by. He went to meet him, and the reunion of the friends was enthusiastic. They left the luggage at the station and set off gaily. Hayward characteristically proposed that first of all they should go for an hour to the National Gallery. He had not seen pictures for some time, and he stated that it needed a glimpse to set him in tune with life. Philip for months had had no one with whom he could talk of art and books. Since the Paris days Hayward had immersed himself in the modern French versifiers, and, such a plethora of poets is there in France, he had several new geniuses to tell Philip about. They walked through the gallery pointing out to one another their favourite pictures. One subject led to another, they talked excitedly. The sun was shining and the air was warm. "Let's go and sit in the park," said Hayward. "We'll look for rooms after luncheon." The spring was pleasant there. It was a day upon which one felt it good merely to live. The young green of the trees was exquisite against the sky, and the sky, pale and blue, was dappled with little white clouds. At the end of the ornamental water was the gray mass of the Horse Guards. The ordered elegance of the scene had the charm of an 18th century picture. It reminded you not of Watteau, whose landscapes are so idyllic that they recall only the woodland glens seen in dreams, but of the more prosaic Jean Baptiste Potier. Philip's heart was filled with lightness. He realized what he had only read before, that art, for there was art in the manner in which he looked upon nature, might liberate the soul from pain. They went to an Italian restaurant for luncheon and ordered themselves a fiaschetto of Chianti. Lingering over the meals, they talked on. They reminded one another of the people they had known at Heidelberg. They spoke of Philip's friends in Paris. They talked of books, pictures, moral, life. And suddenly Philip heard a clock strike 3. He remembered that by this time Mildred was married. He felt a sort of stitch in his heart, and for a minute or two he could not hear what Hayward was saying. But he filled his glass with Chianti. He was unaccustomed to alcohol, and it had gone to his head. For the time, at all events, he was free from care. His quick brain had lain idle for so many months that he was intoxicated now with conversation. He was thankful to have someone to talk to who would interest himself in the things that interested him. "I say, don't let's waste this beautiful day in looking for rooms. I'll put you up tonight. You can look for rooms tomorrow or Monday." "All right. What shall we do?" answered Hayward. "Let's get on a penny steamboat and go down to Greenwich." The idea appealed to Hayward, and they jumped into a cab which took them to Westminster Bridge. They got on the steamboat just as she was starting. Presently Philip, a smile on his lips, spoke. "I remember when first I went to Paris, Clutton, I think it was, gave a long discourse on the subject that beauty is put into things by painters and poets. They create beauty. In themselves there is nothing to choose between the Compagnie of Giotto and a factory chimney. And then beautiful things grow rich with the emotion that they have aroused in succeeding generations. That is why old things are more beautiful than modern. The Ode on a Grecian Urn is more lovely now than when it was written, because for 100 years lovers have read it, and the sick at heart taken comfort in its lines. Philip left Hayward to infer what in the passing scene had suggested these words to him, and it was a delight to know that he could safely leave the inference. It was in sudden reaction from the life he had been leading for so long that he was now deeply affected. The delicate iridescence of the London air gave the softness of a pastel to the grey stone of the buildings, and in the wharfs and storehouses there was the severity of grace of a Japanese print. They went further down, and the splendid Channel, a symbol of the great empire, broadened, and it was crowded with traffic. Philip thought of the painters and the poets who had made all these things so beautiful, and his heart was filled with gratitude. They came to the Pool of London, and who can describe its majesty? The imagination thrills, and heaven knows what figures people still its broad stream. Dr. Johnson, with Boswell by his side, an old Pepys going on board a man-of-war, the pageant of English history and romance and high adventure. Philip turned to Hayward with shining eyes. "Dear Charles Dickens," he murmured, smiling a little at his own emotion. "Aren't you rather sorry you chucked painting?" asked Hayward. "No." "I suppose you like doctoring?" "No, I hate it, but there was nothing else to do. The drudgery of the first 2 years is awful, and unfortunately I haven't got the scientific temperament." "Well, you can't go on changing professions." "Oh no, I'm going to stick to this. I think I shall like it better when I get into the wards. I have an idea that I'm more interested in people than in anything else in the world. And as far as I can see, it's the only profession in which you have your freedom. You carry your knowledge in your head, with a box of instruments and a few drugs, you can make your living anywhere." "Aren't you going to take a practice then?" "Not for a good long time at any rate," Philip answered. "As soon as I've got through my hospital appointments I shall get a ship. I want to go to the East, the Malay Archipelago, Siam, China, and all that sort of thing, and then I shall take odd jobs. Something always comes along, cholera duty in India and things like that. I want to go from place to place. I want to see the world. The only way a poor man can do that is by going in for the medical." They came to Greenwich then. The noble building of Inigo Jones faced the river grandly. "I say, look, that must be the place where poor Jack dived into the mud for pennies," said Philip. They wandered in the park. Ragged children were playing in it, and it was noisy with their cries. Here and there old seamen were basking in the sun. There was an air of 100 years ago. "It seems a pity you wasted 2 years in Paris," said Hayward. "Waste? Look at the movement of that child. Look at the pattern which the sun makes on the ground shining through the trees. Look at that sky. Why, I should never have seen that sky if I hadn't been to Paris." Hayward thought that Philip choked a sob, and he looked at him with astonishment. "What's the matter with you?" "Nothing. I'm sorry to be so damned emotional, but for 6 months I've been starved for beauty." "You used to be so matter of fact. It's very interesting to hear you say that." "Damn it all, I don't want to be interesting," laughed Philip. "Let's go and have a stodgy tea." Chapter 65. Hayward's visit did Philip a great deal of good. Each day his thoughts dwelt less on Mildred. He looked back upon the past with disgust. He could not understand how he had submitted to the dishonour of such a love, and when he thought of Mildred it was with angry hatred, because she had submitted him to so much humiliation. His imagination presented her to him now with her defects of person and manner exaggerated, so that he shuddered at the thought of having been connected with her. "It just shows how damned weak I am," he said to himself. The adventure was like a blunder that no one had committed at a party so horrible that one felt nothing could be done to excuse it. The only remedy was to forget. His horror at the degradation he had suffered helped him. He was like a snake casting its skin, and he looked upon the old covering with nausea. He exulted in the possession of himself once more. He realized how much of the delight of the world he had lost when he was absorbed in that madness which they called love. He had had enough of it. He did not want to be in love any more if love was that. Philip told Hayward something of what he had gone through. "Wasn't it Sophocles," he asked, "who prayed for the time when he could be delivered from the wild beast of passion that devoured his heartstrings?" Philip seemed really to be born again. He breathed the circumambient air as though he had never breathed it before, and he took a child's pleasure in all the facts of the world. He called his period of insanity 6 months' hard labour. Hayward had only been settled in London a few days when Philip received from Blackstable, where it had been sent, a card for a private view at some picture gallery. He took Hayward, and on looking at the catalogue saw that Lawson had a picture in it. "I suppose he sent the card," said Philip. "Let's go and find him. He's sure to be in front of his picture." This, a profile of Ruth Chalice, was tucked away in a corner, and Lawson was not far from it. He looked a little lost, in his large soft hat and loose pale clothes, amongst the fashionable throng that had gathered for the private view. He greeted Philip with enthusiasm, and, with his usual volubility, told him that he had come to live in London, Ruth Chalice was a hussy, he had taken a studio, Paris was played out, he had a commission for a portrait, and they'd better dine together and have a good old talk. Philip reminded him of his acquaintance with Hayward, and was entertained to see that Lawson was slightly awed by Hayward's elegant clothes and grand manner. They sat upon him better than they had done in the shabby little studio which Lawson and Philip had shared. At dinner Lawson went on with his news. Flanagan had gone back to America. Clutton had disappeared. He had come to the conclusion that a man had no chance of doing anything so long as he was in contact with art and artists. The only thing was to get right away. To make the step easier he had quarrelled with all his friends in Paris. He developed a talent for telling them home truths, which made them bear with fortitude his declaration that he had done with that city and was settling in Gerona, a little town in the north of Spain which had attracted him when he saw it from the train on his way to Barcelona. He was living there now alone. "I wonder if he'll ever do any good," said Philip. He was interested in the human side of that struggle to express something which was so obscure in the man's mind that he was become morbid and querulous. Philip felt vaguely that he was himself in the same case, but with him it was the conduct of his life as a whole that perplexed him. It was his means of self-expression, and what he must do with it was not clear. But he had no time to continue with his train of thought, for Lawson poured out a frank recital of his affair with Ruth Chalice. She had left him for a young student who had just come from England, and was behaving in a scandalous fashion. Lawson really thought someone ought to step in and save the young man. She would ruin him. Philip gathered that Lawson's chief grievance was that the rapture had come in the middle of a portrait he was painting. "Women have no real feeling for art," he said. "They only pretend they have." But he finished philosophically enough. "However, I got 4 portraits out of her, and I'm not sure if the last I was working on would ever have been a success." Philip envied the easy way in which the painter managed his love affairs. He had passed 18 months pleasantly enough, had got an excellent model for nothing, and had parted from her at the end with no great pang. "And what about Cronshaw?" asked Philip. "Oh, he's done for," answered Lawson, with the cheerful callousness of his youth. "He'll be dead in 6 months. He got pneumonia last winter. He was in the English hospital for 7 weeks, and when he came out they told him his only chance was to give up liquor." "Poor devil," smiled the abstemious Philip. "He kept off for a bit. He used to go to the Lilas all the same. He couldn't keep away from that. but he used to drink hot milk, avec de la fleur d'oranger, and he was damn dull." "I take it you did not conceal the fact from him." "Oh, he knew it himself. A little while ago he started on whiskey again. He said he was too old to turn over any new leaves. He would rather be happy for 6 months and die at the end of it than linger on for 5 years. And then I think he's been awfully hard up lately. You see, he didn't earn anything while he was ill, and the slut he lives with has been giving him a rotten time." "I remember the first time I saw him I admired him awfully," said Philip. "I thought he was wonderful. It is sickening that vulgar, middle class virtue should pay." "Of course he was a rotter. He was bound to end in the gutter sooner or later," said Lawson. Philip was hurt because Lawson would not see the pity of it. Of course it was cause and effect, but in the necessity with which one follows the other lay all tragedy of life. "Oh, I forgot," said Lawson. "Just after you left he sent round a present for you. I thought you'd be coming back and I didn't bother about it, and then I didn't think it worth sending on. But it'll come over to London with the rest of my things, and you can come to my studio one day and fetch it away if you want it." "You haven't told me what it is yet." "Oh, it's only a ragged little bit of carpet. I shouldn't think it's worth anything. I asked him one day what the devil he'd sent the filthy thing for. He told me he'd seen it at a shop in the Rue de Rennes and bought it for 15 francs. It appears to be a Persian rug. He said you'd asked him the meaning of life, and that was the answer, but he was very drunk." Philip laughed. "Oh yes, I know. I'll take it. It was a favourite wheeze of his. He said I must find out for myself, or else the answer meant nothing." End of chapter 65. Recording by Tom Weiss, Tom'sAudiobooks.com.